156,000 more Jamaicans are working. This is more than any other time in our history. Your government is caring for you.
Me, I go show them my way of justice.
I'm abused.
I need legal advice. I don't deserve this.
The truth of the matter is, justice there for all of we. The Ministry of Justice has trained more than 5,600 persons in restorative justice practices. More than 200,000 victims have been supported by the victim services. Legal aid has reached thousands island-wide. Make we talk it out, not fight it out. Call 888 Justice today.
Remember that big project the government announced them was going to from when? You ever catch yourself and wonder what happened to it? Stop wonder like an outsider and start move like the country belong to you. You have a right to publicly owned information, and the Access to Information Act gives you that power. I know you have enough questions about how government are run or not run, so let me show you how it works. Say mosquito spraying going on in your community, your children asthmatic and you want to know what chemicals are in it. Or what about that Auditor General report on a public official getting twice his salary with no proper approval? Is your taxes and you want to know if they paid it back? First, do some basic searching to see what is already on government websites. If you don't see what you're looking for, make a formal ATI request by completing the application form on the ATI site or sending a letter or email. And remember, you don't have to say why you need it. It is your right to know. Make sure you send your request to the right agency, and once they confirm receipt, they get 30 calendar days to provide the information. A maximum of 60 if extra time is needed. Yes, I know you want access to everything, but sensitive documents are protected from the public for up to 20 years. For example, documents that would expose a citizen's personal privacy, or those dealing with cabinet discussions, the Governor General's office, or information on the investigative activities of the security forces. Any public officer who tries to destroy or hide any official document can be sanctioned. And if you're having difficulties, the ATI unit will help. So, what if the chemicals in the mosquito spray are toxic? What if the agency did not even try to get back the money they paid out? Call or email your MP. Share the concern, because as your elected representative, they can represent your questions to the government ministers in the House. Remember, it is the job of parliamentarians to monitor and hold the government to account on your behalf. Is not every country gives citizens this kind of power, you know? And at 20 years we have this law, and we barely use it. So access information and mind your business, Jamaica. Visit jampja.org today to see what information we access to make it easier for you to hold the government to account. Let's do our job to make Jamaica land we love, Jamaica land we own, and Jamaica land we run well. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, funded by the European Union in partnership with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica.
Motorists, as Minister of Justice, I appeal to you. Obey the road code, pay your ticket on time, and only go to court if the ticket is being contested. Close to 80% of matters coming to the parish courts are for traffic breaches. Let's work together to make our roads safe and ease the burden on our courts.
Since 2016, 156,000 more Jamaicans are working. This is more than any other time in our history. Your government is caring for you.
Attitude is something which productivity will require, and a good attitude. So these are conversations which are difficult. Because how do you instill a good attitude? It starts by the kinds of activities that you engage your children in at an early age. What are we teaching our children even in our own homes? How do they see us reacting to challenges? How do they hear us addressing issues? That's what's going to shape their attitude and their mindset.
The following is brought to you by MOCA, the major organized crime and anti-corruption agency with kind support of NIA and USAID.
Criminal minds think they are cunning. The major organized crime and anti-corruption agency have them running. Your friend a shout, come scam. Take time running, because we ready for the ops. Drive up on your block, step out now me block. Cyber take about your laptop, pull up every lock, no evidence to drop. We put it in a cuffs and now we have the underground. When you say scam, you better look out for. When you move corrupt, better look out for. They say you get where, look out for. Look out for, look out for. From you say scam, you better look out for. When you move corrupt, better look out for. They say you get where, look out for. Look out for, look out for.
The proceeding was brought to you by MOCA, the major organized crime and anti-corruption agency with the kind support of NIA and USAID.
MOCA, MOCA. What a flow, what a flow. What a flow, what a flow. Come on. What a flow, what a flow. What a flow, what a flow. The water put it just like a freestyle. The lifeblood flowing mile by mile. It's legacy, a beat that don't stop like Bob Marley say. One love on top. The sewage water out of sight, but it's always wrong, don't lose the light. From factories and wells so deep, corals, mangroves and fish they weep. Green water for the garden, keep it green. Save the cash and the earth gets clean. We use the water with a mindful mind. It's out of sight but never far behind. In nature, the answers always flow. Like water running pure, the cycle grows. It renews itself, same drop, same beat. It's all good, man, you got the heat. Water flow, water flow. No clean water, no pipes they grow. Protect our water, protect our future.
Time to go.
People always say government must be held accountable. But it's whose job to keep government accountable, and what that really mean? Well, you see, when ministers and public officials have to provide answers for decisions made and can face consequences for those actions and decisions, that means they're being held accountable. Keeping government accountable is a key responsibility of our elected representatives, and the Parliament provides special tools or mechanisms just for this. As citizens, we need to understand how they work so we can play our part to ensure that the members of Parliament we elect are using the tools and doing their job well. Here are 4 of the primary tools you should understand and talk to your MP about. Tool number 1, Minister Statements. To effectively monitor the government, MPs need to stay informed. Every Tuesday when Parliament sits, different cabinet ministers are scheduled to give an update on decisions they're making on our behalf. These updates are called Statements by Ministers. They cover a wide range of national issues that other MPs, media, and citizens may have questions about and wish to examine further. That brings us to tool number 2. What you do when you want information? You ask questions, and that's why we have question time. Both opposition and government MPs can submit questions to the Prime Minister or Cabinet Ministers for details on, for example, how a contract was awarded or expenditure to purchase tablets for schools. So if you ever have a question for a government minister, try asking through your MP. After all, that's why they're your political representatives. They should represent your questions and concerns to the government. Tool number 3, Parliamentary Debates. When cabinet ministers present the government's proposals for new policies, laws, and programs, parliamentary debates allow both opposition and government MPs to air concerns, make suggestions, and endorse proposals. If you ever watch those debates, you know they can get a little fiery. But the debate is important, as it informs decisions and continues until a vote is taken on the way forward. Then we have tool number 4, Parliamentary Committees. The general sittings of Parliament are not always sufficient for detailed examination of government work, so oversight committees are formed using government and opposition members to do just that. Some committees like the PAC and the PAAC are in place for an entire parliamentary term. Their job is to monitor the use of public funds to find ways to increase value and efficiency while reducing waste and corruption. Cabinet and state ministers are not appointed to oversight committees since they are a part of the government. Some committees are formed when a need arises. For example, joint select committees are formed to review draft policies or legislation or to probe other matters of serious national importance. Members of these committees are both opposition and government MPs and senators, and these committees will usually invite citizens to share their opinions, concerns, and recommendations. So there you have it, 4 accountability tools of Parliament that are used to make sure government run right. Visit jamja.org to find contact information for your MP. Invite them to meet with the community so they can better represent your issues and concerns in Parliament and keep government accountable. Get involved and let's make Jamaica land we love, Jamaica land we own, and Jamaica land we run well. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, funded by the European Union and the Inter-American Development Bank in partnership with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica.
Washing your hands properly can help keep you and others safe. Remember to wash often, especially before eating or touching your face.
Zoom in on the nutrition facts. It there in the table on the side or the back. You fi check out the servings, just do the maths. Not taking too much, finger below the facts. Zoom in on the nutrition facts. It there in the table on the side or the back. Take note of the sodium, the sugars and the fats by percent or less in upon the right track. You fi zoom in on the nutrition facts. It there in the table on the side or the back. Vitamins, minerals and vitamin 2, 20% and more that good for you. You fi zoom in. Check the nutrition facts. You fi zoom in. Check the nutrition facts. You fi zoom in. Check the nutrition facts. Less sugar, less salt intake and less fat. You fi zoom in.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Jamaica Moves, the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, the National Health Fund, and Japan.
Me, I go show them my way of justice.
I'm abused.
I need legal advice. I don't deserve this.
The truth of the matter is, justice there for all of we. The Ministry of Justice has trained more than 5,600 persons in restorative justice practices. More than 200,000 victims have been supported by the victim services. Legal aid has reached thousands island-wide. Make we talk it out, not fight it out. Call 888 Justice today.
Today, we can report 2 consecutive years of reduction in major crimes and murders, with a significant reduction of almost 20% in murders for 2024.
Between January 2022 and January 2025, we have reduced murders by 51%. And January 2025 had the lowest monthly murder count since September 2014.
Our efforts have also resulted in the reduction of active gangs by 50%. We continue to increase firearm seizures, and in more communities, we are experiencing less violence. We will realize our vision of Jamaica as the place of choice to live, work, do business, raise families, and retire in peace and prosperity.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
We want a piece for Jamaica. Yo, what are you? Oh man, none of that. Yo, no, brother, no, man. You see you ever play ref? Dirty game, man. Yeah, but a bad game. No, I said, person who come from, brother, I want to live good, man. I want to live good, brethren. So shake on, I can play a little bad, brethren. Really, have to shake on? Yeah, man, and no badness, brethren. Just live good, man. Come together, I make the violence done.
Tell me something. How much time you ever hear the government announce a project and wonder why they must spend millions on this and not on that? Well, if you think there's nothing you can do about how your money is spent, think again. Jamaica's budget is more than just numbers. It reveals our biggest problems and goals, our plans to fix them, and what to prioritize. We can even call it a promise book of what will be done to improve our lives. Now, let's talk about the 4 stages of the budget cycle so we can understand how it works and get involved. Stage 1. Planning and review. The Ministry of Finance sends out a budget call to every ministry, which outlines the priorities and constraints to guide how those ministries prepare their budget. After ministries submit their drafts, the Finance Ministry reviews, compiles, and sends them to Cabinet for review and approval. Stage 2. Parliamentary debate and approval. The Finance Minister tables all budget documents in the House of Representatives. The Standing Finance Committee, which is all 63 MPs, sits to examine the budget documents, and each minister presents their budget and answers concerns the committee has. The committee's report is then tabled in the House, followed by the estimated expenditure, which is tabled as legislation called the Appropriations Bill. That's right, the budget of Jamaica is law. The budget debate formally opens. We have presentations from the Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister, Opposition Leader, and the Shadow Finance Minister. After their presentations, our MPs vote for or against approval. Like all legislation, it goes to the Senate for their approval and then to the Governor General for his royal assent. No later than March 31st, end of the financial year. Stage 3. Implementation. The new financial year begins and approved budgets are sent to ministries. Collecting taxes, borrowing loans, and receiving grants begin. And so does the spending. Stage 4. Budget oversight. Now, this is where citizens don't need permission to get involved. Throughout the year, operations and spending are assessed by internal auditors and the Auditor General's department that makes sure public entities are compliant with laws and that their financial reports are accurate. All Auditor General reports are submitted to our Parliament's Public Accounts Committee for review and cross-examination of public officials. The Ministry of Finance, Integrity Commission, and MOCA also monitor government spending to guard against poor financial management and corruption. It is our job to review these reports, check the findings in the newspaper, and look up if breaches are fixed at jampja.org. If not, ask your MP what he or she has done to ensure public officials are held to account. No more 9-day wonders. So, did the government follow through on their spending and investment promises last year? What promises will next year's budget have? How will they affect you, and how can you ensure that you get what is promised? For access to the national budget, check out JAMP's easy digital version and contact info for your MP at jampja.org. Then link your MP and see what progress is being made throughout the entire budget cycle. Support JAMP. Let's do our job to make Jamaica land we love, Jamaica land we own, and Jamaica land we run well. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, funded by the European Union in partnership with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica.
The budget is made up of expenditure and revenue estimates that are tabled in the House of Representatives at the same time by the Minister of Finance and the Public Service. The expenditure is the projected costs to cover the country's loans to public bodies, public debt, non-wage expenditure, wages, salaries, and capital for the financial year. The revenue is the total sum of money that the government will collect or raise to fund its expenditure for the financial year. The major revenue items include taxation, non-tax and capital revenue, grants, capital development fund, and loan receipts. The national budget is everybody's business because it impacts every Jamaican. Visit mof.gov.jm for more information.
A new story is being written for all Jamaicans. The Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation is on a mission to transform lives. From increasing access to potable water, providing secure homes for the most vulnerable, and helping you own a piece of the rock, we're revitalizing communities and preserving our environment. We're making an impact. See the difference. feel the difference. Building a better Jamaica for you and me.
You can feel it. Make JC.
Motorists, as Minister of Justice, I appeal to you. Obey the road code. Pay your ticket on time. And only go to court if the ticket is being contested. Close to 80% of matters coming to the parish courts are for traffic breaches. Let's work together to make our roads safe and ease the burden on our courts.
We and the youths united against corruption, changing the world and the way we function. The youths united against corruption, changing the world and the way we function. Yo, remember the youth, them are we future leaders, policy creators, decision makers. As if them are not just the cornerstone, but a crucial part to a better tomorrow. United against corruption, changing the world and the way we function. The youths united against corruption.
Message from the Integrity Commission.
Most major illnesses that affect Jamaicans are caused by unhealthy lifestyles. Over 50% of Jamaicans are overweight. 1 in 3 Jamaicans has high blood pressure. 1 in 8 Jamaicans has diabetes. 17% of Jamaicans have high cholesterol. A healthy lifestyle can reduce the risk of most of these diseases. Things like regular exercise and adequate rest can play an important role in maintaining good health. The other major consideration is eating healthy. The question is, how do you walk into a restaurant or fast food outlet and identify the healthier menu items? Better For You is an initiative to help Jamaicans to eat healthier. Restaurants and fast food outlets can voluntarily participate by identifying the items on their menu that meet the food-based dietary guidelines for Jamaica. These menu items would be easily identified with the Better For You logo, so customers can quickly identify healthier meal options by looking at the menu or menu board. Once they see the Better For You logo, they can confidently order that menu item, knowing that it's a healthier choice. Better For You will help Jamaicans to make better choices and prompt restaurants to add better options to their menu. Better For You is better for everyone. Good health begins with better choices.
What if I told you that you own thousands of acres of land, more than 100 companies with over 100,000 employees and billions in the bank? Well, I have news for you. You do. Jamaica belongs to you, and you need expert protection to safeguard those assets for your future, your children, and your children's children. And you already have it. A key protector is our Auditor General, whose role is outlined by the biggest, baddest law in all the land, the Constitution. The Auditor General's main job is to examine the financial reports of all public entities to ensure that they are accurate and that public funds are used appropriately and effectively to deliver public goods and services without waste, theft, and mismanagement. Here's how it's done. A team of highly trained auditors reviews and verifies that the right amount of money is spent on only what's approved in the national budget and in accordance with the laws and policies that protect public resources. Now, the right amount of money can be spent on the right things and Jamaicans still no benefit. So the Auditor General assesses the outcome for programs and projects as well. Audit reports will also contain recommendations to improve the operations of the audited entity, and the findings are submitted to the Parliament's Public Accounts Committee, the PAC. Every year, an annual report is submitted by December 31. Both government and opposition MPs serve on the PAC, and they summon public entity managers to answer questions so that they and the public, the real owners, yes, you, can understand what went wrong and how to prevent a recurrence. What are some things that can and do go wrong? Cost and time overruns, missing financial reports, unreported losses, unauthorized spending, unsupported payments, unlawful contracting, undisclosed conflict of interest, and more. Though the AG identifies the abuse of laws and policies, the law does not empower that office to penalize or sanction, but it does empower the Financial Secretary in the Ministry of Finance. It is also the duty of other anti-corruption and law enforcement bodies to grab the button and investigate to ensure penalties are applied when appropriate. But the AG alone can't watch all. So when things don't look straight, the Minister of Finance, members of Parliament, Cabinet, public servants, and importantly, you must blow the whistle and the AG will look deeper. So this is where you come in, with 4 things you can do to strengthen those who are fighting to protect our future. Tune into PBCJ on Tuesdays for the PAC and mind your business, Jamaica. It's our belongings, but we have to move like we understand that. And next time you hear a news report about the AG, you just left it up to the media. Visit the AG's website at www.auditorgeneral.gov.jm and check out the findings yourself. Then, keep track of how government has fixed the issue or not at www.jampja.org's Accountometer. And if you're not happy with what you see, it's your job to contact your employees. It's easy when you visit the MP tracker on jampja.org. This is how we can do our part to make Jamaica land we own, Jamaica land we love, and Jamaica land we run well. A message from the Jamaica.
To consider the report on the bill shortly entitled the Tobacco Control Act 2020. It's Thursday, June 5th, 2025, and it's now 10:44. All right, so any volunteers for prayer? Can I ask someone to volunteer, please? Maybe Dr. Longmore can do us the honors. Sophia Longmore, Senator Longmore.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you everybody for joining us here today. We are joining here together to celebrate our...
Oops, I don't think Dr. Longmore is in a position to pray.
Chairman, I'm happy to offer a word of prayer.
Yes, please. Thank you, Senator Golden.
Heavenly Father, we invite your divine presence into this meeting today while we consider and deliberate on the bill dealing with the tobacco industry. Lord, we ask you for guidance, we ask you for wisdom, we ask you for temperance, and we ask, Lord, that you continue to protect and bless this nation. In Jesus' name I pray.
Thank you very much for that. Any absence for persons? Any apologies for absence? Sorry. Anyone?
Yes, I have Dr. Guy. Apologize for not attending today. Dr. Guy.
Okay, Dr. Guy. Anybody else?
No,
Anyone?
Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. So my remarks will be brief. Really appreciate the short turnaround of another meeting. I thought we made good progress last time and looking forward to doing the same. So we'll go right into the reading and confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of May 21st, 2025. You should have all gotten an email with the minutes. So I'm going to go through, assuming that you have access. So page 1, which are just the information on persons who have attended, apologies, and so on.
On page 1,
Yes.
Chair, Miss Colette Curlew, she was present. She was there in person, not virtual.
Okay, so Miss Colette Curlew was in person, not virtual.
And to add to the persons present, Miss Michelle Thomas, Crown Counsel, Ministry of Health, and Miss Wendy Brown Linton, Director of Policy Coordination, Ministry of Health.
Okay, is that noted? It's Malcolm.
Yes, Chairman. Thank you.
Malcolm Joyce.
Deuce, Chairman.
Do. Oh. Is that French or Spanish or
French, Chairman.
Well, boy, I tell you, I've had a lot of difficulty with that language, so forgive me for bastardizing it. Do. Okay, thank you. Any other? No. All right, so let's move to page 2,
On page 2, Minister, under item 8, the first paragraph, the third sentence, I'm suggesting the amended bill was subsequently received in November 2024 to add the year.
Okay, is that noted, Ms. Booth?
Chairman, year to be 2024.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Any other? No?
Chair.
Yes.
Chair. Morning. Also on page 2, at paragraph 6, I believe the reference should be to the minutes of November 7, 2024.
Okay. Is that
Noted, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other?
Thank you.
No, page 3.
On page 3, Chair, the first paragraph, in the second line where it makes reference to unsettled errors in the bill, errors should be replaced to matters.
Okay.
So in this paragraph where it makes reference to errors, it should be matters.
Noted, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other? No. Page 4. Okay. Page 5. No matter. Okay. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8.
Chair.
Yes.
If we may go back to page 6 with your indulgence, page 5 and 6, just a general comment. The definitions as quoted, it is preferable if they are stated in the manner in which they appear in the bill. So if they're not to be capitalized, it's better that they not be capitalized in the minutes. Just a point. Because it seems as if they're all capitalized because they appear as headings, but they really should not be capitalized unless they are properly capitalized.
Noted, Chair. So we'll reduce the capital to lowercase.
Unless it's to be capitalized. Thank you.
As stated in the bill. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Any other for 8? Page 8. No. Page 9. Okay. Page 10. $11. Page 12. Page 13. $14. $15. $16. 17. $18. 19. 20. Finally, 21 of 21 pages. Page 21. Okay. Thank you very much. I see no other matter in terms of corrections. So can I ask for the minutes to be adopted? So moved by.
So moved, Chair.
By Senator Gale, seconded by Senator Golding, maybe, or Senator Allen.
Seconded, Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we go right into the matters arising, which there any matter. I mean, we know where we were last time, and my assumption is that we will continue from there. But if there's any matter outstanding that anyone wants to raise outside of the substantive focus, then you can do so now. Otherwise, I would turn over to, is it Katie or Mr. Edwards?
Mr. Edwards.
I'll turn over to Mr. Edwards to start us off with, lead us on in the discussion that we've been having. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. So we were at the end of the discussion on the proposed new clause 8. This is the one dealing with the interactions, limited interactions between the industry and tobacco industry and specified public body or specified public official. And we were moving on to look at clause 9. So I am at the heading of the draft report beginning. New clause 9, avoidance of conflict of interest. It should be conflict of interest. Certain arrangements or engagements between public officials or public bodies and the tobacco industry. All public officials should disclose to the appropriate public body their interest in the tobacco industry on commencement of employment, their engagement with the public body, or as soon as the official becomes aware of, or would reasonably be expected to be aware of holding of an interest. Your committee is of the view that a person shall not be liable under this section if the person proves that notwithstanding that the person took all reasonable steps in the circumstances to be aware of any holding by the person of an interest in the tobacco industry, the person was unaware of the holding of any such interest. Now, I should indicate, Chair, that subsequent to the preparation of this report, there has been discussion among the legal stakeholders and the legal department stakeholders and the Ministry of Health, and there have been some changes. So therefore, the reference being made to liability was on the assumption that there would have been certain penalty provisions in relation to infractions against this clause. Those provisions, it is proposed by the legal and technical, wider technical team, that those penalty provisions be removed. So the reference to liability in this context would no longer be applicable. There would be a duty, nevertheless, to make the disclosure, but the penalty provisions that had been proposed are now being recommended to be. So against that background, I continue.
I see Senator Gale's hand up. Senator Gale, you want to come in?
Thanks, Chairman. So I just want to make sure that all that is required in this case, Mr. Edwards, is the duty to make the declaration.
That is correct, Senator Gale. That is correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chairman.
We continue. So provision should be made that a public body should record a disclosure of interest made to it. Further, a public official who makes a disclosure of his or her interest in the tobacco industry should not be present during any interaction with the industry, take part in any decision making of the public body in respect of the tobacco industry, and influence any person directly or indirectly involved in the decision making of the public body. A person who seeks employment as a public official in a role that involves developing or implementing public health policy related to tobacco control should declare current or previous occupational activity or any other affiliation with the tobacco industry. And this should be done for the purpose of determining whether a conflict of interest exists or is likely to exist in relation to the person. Further, a public official who has a direct role in developing and implementing public health policy shall declare his or her interest in the tobacco industry to the appropriate authority and make divestment of that interest in the manner prescribed. In other words, provision would be made in guidance or otherwise for that process to be done. A public body or public official should not receive any monetary and non-monetary payment, gift, contribution, or service from the tobacco industry. An entity that is a part of the tobacco industry shall not grant any monetary and non-monetary payment, gift, contribution, or service to a public body or public official. The reference to penalty that is in the draft report will no longer apply.
Before you continue, Mr. Edwards, in light of the fact that previously it was a recommendation of the Committee for an Administrative Penalty, the recommendation now, Minister, following consultations with the CPC, Solicitor General, and the Legal Reform Department, is that these provisions be removed from the bill. So there would be no provisions for an administrative penalty. So we would seek the committee's position on that for the record.
Okay. What is anybody wants to comment on this? Anybody? I mean, I had some concerns, to be frank, the issue of what is the motivation for someone to declare if they feel that they can take the risk of not declaring, and really nothing happens. What's the motivation for someone who may be tempted to be involved and have interest? You have negative incentive, you have positive incentive, and it's. I mean, is it the shame of being found out because you'll be identified with having misled your fiduciary duty or not followed through on your particular responsibility? And is that sufficient to keep deviants, if you will, from engaging in the process, to influence the process? That was my concern. And then secondly, what the precedent is for this kind of clause. I don't know if Paho wants to come in on this to hear their opinion, but I just wondered. So Stein, you're online.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I would note that the precedent that we see in other countries speaks to this, the issue that you raised directly, is that without a negative incentive, there is a tendency for persons to feel that they can move forward without any possible impact. And what we see is that while shame is an important factor, an administrative penalty is consistent in other applications of other laws across the world, including jurisdictions similar to Jamaica. Thank you.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Kadian.
So if I may, or I'll yield to the Solicitor General.
Solicitor General wants to come in.
Good morning, sorry, to you, Chair, and your members and colleagues. Can I just clarify? It's not that there are no sanctions, it's just that there are no criminal sanctions.
Oh.
And in our jurisdiction, we don't use this term administrative penalty. That's not a feature of our law. However, these are public servants or public officials. If we're looking at, is it clause 9? And I think this deals with public officials. So public officials are answerable to, well, we have a very wide definition of public official, but if you're looking at persons like me, a civil servant, you can take disciplinary action, and this is what would happen generally. In our jurisdiction, even when you have conflict of interest provisions for boards and so on, usually what can happen is the person loses a job. If it's a board director, the minister can remove that offending board director from being a member of the board. If it's a civil servant, the relevant person who has delegation of authority can take disciplinary action against you. So I would prefer that the record be more accurate. It's not that there is no sanction. What we're talking about, that there would be no criminal sanction. And we don't use criminal sanctions to deal with every situation. There are usually different levels of sanctions that you can apply in different situations. And this is one of them where we don't deal with conflict of interest as a criminal matter, but we deal with it otherwise. Thank you very much, Chair.
I appreciate that clarity, Madam ASG. And I believe all of us on the committee are fully conscious of the last point you made, that we don't always use criminal sanctions. So that's we're aware of that. But the clarity is important, and since that is the case, then I think all should be aware of that, and that aspect of it should be very, should I say, visible, or certainly noted. I don't know if it can be referenced in the section of the bill itself, or is it okay as is? So maybe Madam SG can come in here, just for clarity.
So I think it should be made clear in the report. The report is where you would explain.
All right.
And you give an explanation in the report. And the report forms part of the record of Parliament, which we use for different purposes, including court.
Right, of course. All right, so Mr. Edwards, can you note that and let us ensure that that is the case in whatever format should be. All right, thank you very much. Continue, Mr. Edwards.
So we next go to clause 10, which relates to disclosure of prior or future engagement with the tobacco industry. And the proposed provision is that a public official who has or had a direct role in the development and implementation of public health policy relating to tobacco control shall not engage in any occupational activity with the tobacco industry within a period of 3 years from the time the person ceases to be a public official. From the time the person ceases being a public official, he or she should inform the appropriate public body about any intention to engage in occupational activity within the tobacco industry, whether gainful or not, after the expiration of the period. And again, Chair, further to deliberations among the technical and legal teams, there is being proposed that a penalty not be provided, an administrative penalty not be provided in relation to an infraction under this provision. So this would also have to be put to the committee formally. The question being that
this is a distinction between criminal sanction and administrative sanction.
Yes, the same explanation.
Right.
applies.
So
Yes.
again, that's why maybe it's the way you have positioned it in terms of your own articulation and the document. I think it has to be very clear that there are sanctions, possible sanctions, okay, but not criminal. Thank you very much. Any comments, or are we okay with this?
So, Chairman, the question I'd like to ask, because this is indicative of you not participating, not engaging with the tobacco industry for 3 years, assuming that you would have left that particular public body. And then it speaks to the intention now for you to signal whether or not you intend to engage. And the part now about, well, we're not using administrative penalty, but then who, Mr. Edwards, would be directly responsible now? This person is not working with may go out and work with the industry within the 3 years. So they would have failed to honor that aspect of the agreement. But who would be in the scope of being responsible to discipline this individual?
Well, the reference in the text, the proposed text, is to the appropriate authority where you had served. So yes, it is true that the person is no longer engaged with
You're no
that
longer
body,
there. Yes.
but the obligation is to inform, say, for instance, the Services Commission, you're a civil servant, that
Okay.
you, although you are involved in public health policy development, in the area of tobacco control, you are now seeking to work with an entity in the industry.
I'm just
That's the obligation.
yeah, I can understand the obligation and the intended commitment. But if you are in breach of that, I'm trying to wrap my head around what could be the possible consequential impact to that individual and who would be responsible.
Yes, well, the truth is, as the Solicitor General indicated, if we're looking at issues of conflict of interest and integrity, there are several areas of both law and practice that would create a sanction of sorts. For instance, if you are found to be somebody who has directly acted in contravention of a statutory obligation, that is something that could be flagged in relation to a future employer.
Got you now.
Okay, thank you, Senator Gill. Senator Shireen Golding is on.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, are you hearing me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. I don't think I have made it a secret throughout our deliberations that I am not a fan of the clauses set out at 9 and 10 at all. I don't think I've made that a secret. And Senator Gale's question a while ago really brought home to me a little bit of what I think might be an overreach. You see, I do understand our obligations having signed on to the WHO convention, and I do understand the nature of the process that would have arrived at the provisions in that that convention. But the convention allows us to craft legislation suitable to our jurisdiction, suitable to our circumstance, and consistent with our obligations. I find in 9 and 10 an attempt to honor our obligations to the convention, but not with enough regard to our circumstances and jurisdiction. And so Mr. Edwards has come today to remove to indicate to us that the criminal penalty is removed from 9. And Senator Gale's question in terms of the enforcement now of a person under 10 who advises that they're engaging in an activity, or who leaves the public body and is now engaged with an entity in the tobacco industry, is going to be liable to an administrative penalty, and I'm using those words loosely under the guidance of my Solicitor General, with which I agree, but some sanction by the Public Service Commission. So I want to just ask you, Chairman, and I'm sorry to raise this again because I feel like I may have raised it before. Why are we going down this road? Why are we going down the road of this kind of clause? We're asking public servants in this particular area to do their duty, leave, come out. We're concerned about conflict of interest. And so we're now setting up a regime to monitor them when they come out, because you need some way of monitoring if you're to know that a person leaves and goes off to work with the tobacco industry. And I'm wondering, why are we even concerned about that? Why, even if that falls under a conflict of interest scheme or framework, what is the danger that we see if somebody is to leave the ministry where they were developing policy to go work for the tobacco industry? I'm not seeing a danger that is sufficiently concerning to me as a citizen or a legislator. And so while I'm sure the regional bodies would love to see us tighten and get as close to the convention recommendations as possible, where is the malady in Jamaica that justifies us going to this?
Can I respond? And I respect your opinion, obviously, Senator Sherry Golding. But I think it's important for us to recognize a couple of things. First of all, the convention and our seal of support and participation would have had the context factored in and would have been the subject of much deliberations and involved many persons at various levels representing the country. And so I don't think we should create the impression that their deliberation around signing on to a convention is solely based on the influence of a foreign or alien concept or principle. We have to, give them, I think, the due respect and the recognition that they would.
If that's the understanding you took from what I said, I want to correct that quickly. I don't want the impression to be given that that's the criticism I was making. It wasn't.
But I'm getting there. Just allow me to finish, please. Thank you. So, firstly, I've been part of many of these conversations, and Jamaica's interests are well represented, I believe. Secondly, I think we also have to be contextual beyond the shores of Jamaica by examining the industry in which we operate and in this instance, the universal approach of the tobacco industry to manipulate, and that is a strong word, but I maintain it, the forces at play within jurisdictions to gain an advantage to support their particular lifestyle. And I think that there are many examples of that in many countries throughout the world. And the pattern is very similar. Wherever there is the possibility of an advantage, inside information, persons of influence who can then become a source of influence on their side, all of those strategies, tactics are used to support the cause. I think, therefore, the consideration around having a sort of gap between immediate access and current access is a valid principle, and it's practiced in many industries. I mean, the whole competitive nature of a free market, also that principle is almost universal. Someone sells a business, normally the lawyers will tell them they can't practice in that business for a while, or certainly not in the same jurisdiction. So, in other words, what I'm saying is that this is not new territory. And I hear you, and I appreciate what you're saying. I don't want to devalue your contribution. It's not new territory, but it's operating on a principle that, to my mind, has been examined on, in many ways, and there's a lot of precedent for it. And I don't think that it will do any harm to having it there. And I certainly think that there are advantages to having it there, because persons who are on the inside, who have been part and parcel of trying to manage, monitor, restrict, would be in an advantageous position if they then flip this script and now become part of the advocacy of the very industry that they have been trying to restrict. Because they would have access to a lot of things that are current, things that are likely to happen in the future. So I think it's a precautionary principle, but one that has some validity and one that has been used, not just in this instance, but in several other instances. And so I think there's value in it.
Chairman, can I just ask you then, if that is your answer, and I note, well, I think I've said it already, but I'm not talking about our representation in dealing with the convention, and I want that to be very clear. I'm not making that criticism at all, right? But I do note the presence of PAHO in these meetings, and I note the advocacy of PAHO, and I also understand PAHO's own interest in this matter. So my interest in this matter is in relation to the Jamaican people as a legislator, right? So I haven't yet heard, and I did not hear in our deliberations, the mischief existing in our jurisdiction that justifies this. That's one. And two, while I've heard what you have said, and in principle, I agree with you. Unfortunately, I don't think it's always true in Jamaica. And we have a number of laws on our books, enacted over decades, enacted in the last 5 years. And this may very well be one of them that we have not necessarily contextualized in relation to Jamaica. So where's the problem in Jamaica that we fix by sanctioning a person who is going after the tobacco industry in Jamaica? Because bear in mind, we have 3 million people here. And yes, I suppose we sell a lot of cigarettes, but we're by no means a huge market in comparison to other places. So as a precautionary matter, I hear you. But Senator Gale's question then becomes the part that hits as an issue for me, because how do you monitor this and how do you sanction that person if there's to be a sanction? What's the purpose of the provision? I also don't agree there should be a criminal sanction, but the person has left the government service. Who is going to pull the person back to sanction them? The Public Service Commission? I don't know that the Public Service Commission have any jurisdiction over me after I leave government service. The chief personnel officer can't call me to a meeting when I leave the government work.
Senator Gold, remember that we have removed the criminal sanction component of the.
No, I said so. But I'm asking how you enforcing it. Because that's what Senator Gale asked, and the response he was given by Mr. Edwards was there are other mechanisms, Public Service Commission, the authority that hires public servants. And I'm saying, on what basis does the Public Service Commission now go about dealing with matters that have to do with persons who have left the service?
Right. Okay, so I see Ian Stein's hand up, but I just want to clarify something, and I'm not. I mean, we're all here arguing in the interest of the best interest of Jamaica, but just to say in terms of the multilaterals like PAHO, WHO, we actually are PAHO. It's made up of member states, so we have to be careful how we again identify these organizations as alien to our culture when the culture of those institutions are determined by the membership, and the membership, we are critically a part of that. But anyway, that maybe is a side point. Mr. Stein, you want to come in here?
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you very much for your last comments, which is one of the pieces that I would have underscored, that PAHO is not an alien organization. It is a representation of its member states. The only point I want to make here is the consistency of this particular clause within Article 3 of the Framework Convention for Tobacco Control, which is all about disclosure and transparency and trying to hold people accountable for the transparency and disclosure. That is the only point I want to raise. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Yeah.
Chairman, I beg of you.
Yes.
In light of that submission, so the intent of aspects of this provision is to encourage a kind of behavior.
Yes.
It does not prevent an individual from supporting the intent of the provision. My challenge, if someone fails, who is going to be accountable to treating with that breach? I have no difficulty, absolutely, in encouraging a kind of behavior. Don't work, make the declaration, and so on. But I'm just grappling with the far-reaching effect of imposing some kind of sanction of any sort if someone fails to do so. I mean, if you name them, and that's a shame, they have no control over that because you name the person.
Right.
By suggesting that, listen, there is a provision in law that requires you to accord to certain kind of behavior. The other point I want to make is that, yes, we have signed on to a convention, but it's not every convention that we have signed on to that we have supported specific of those conventions into our laws. Because I'm of the profound view, sometimes different market, different culture drives different needs. But I'm a little befuddled about, the imposition of any kind of sanction in this case, and who would be responsible for it. Because we have not yet identified who could be responsible for it and whose failure it would be in not imposing that sanction when we have binded it in law.
Okay. Katie and Birch wants to come in.
Chairman, before Ms. Birch comes in, if you would allow me, Senator Gale just said something a while ago, and I just want to remind us that it's not just the imposition of a sanction, because once you're talking about any kind of sanction, disciplinary or otherwise, there has to be due process, which means there has to be a process which somebody must administer and engage, and a person must be entitled to representation, etc. So it's an entire bureaucracy that you're now inviting in order to satisfy the enforcement mechanisms of a provision.
Okay.
Okay, so taking into consideration the challenges which the technical and legal team discussed in terms of enforcement, that is why we are recommending now that there be no sanction for a breach of this provision, recognizing one, as the SG has said, in terms of administrative penalties within our application within our jurisdiction, and the challenges with enforcement. So there is no sanction being proposed currently. So there would be no criminal or civil sanction. So it is aimed at encouraging the transparency and reducing conflict of interest. In terms of the mischief that we're trying to address, the tobacco companies, they're international companies, and it is established in terms of how they operate in terms of tobacco industry interference, especially into the development and implementation of tobacco control policies. And so this is aimed at mitigating or reducing that possibility where if someone who is directly involved in developing and implementation tobacco public health policy and tobacco control, they would not be able to engage with the tobacco industry and therefore possibly use that information to the benefit of the tobacco industry to undermine the tobacco control policies which the government is trying to implement.
Okay, anybody else wants to comment? As I said,
One question, Chair. If Ms. Birch is saying that there's no sanction, so clause 4 would come out, then we would be left with the redraft. Sorry, so many things open on the screen. Did we do a redraft of 10 or did we just remove the sanction?
We have removed this. What we are proposing is to remove the sanction, and which would have been in the new clause 11, which we're going to get to in the report, where our recommendation now is to remove that section speaking to enforcement of sections 9 and 10.
Very well. So then if you remove sanctions at 10 and 9, and then you're removing this new clause 11A that was suggested, then my question, Chairman, is why is it not in administrative protocols? Why is it in the legislation?
Mr. Edwards?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. Yes, so the intention is, as has been sounded in this discussion, is to create a culture of disclosure. So the fact that the criminal or administrative sanctions, penalties have been removed, the direct criminal and administrative penalties have been removed. The idea is that by placing this provision upfront in the body of the bill, it will become the framework for further guidance, further instructions, notices that may be developed to support the legislation. If these provisions were not in the text of the primary legislation, they would, I would suggest, somehow have less of an impact. So the idea is that by placing these provisions in the body of the primary legislation, they set the framework for any other subsidiary or related provisions that may give it support. Thank you.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, that's a very deeply disturbing response from Mr. Edwards. We don't use law like that. That's not the purpose of law. We don't put in legislation things that are not things a court can look to act, that the breach of which means nothing. So why are they in our law? Legislation is something very, very peculiar. It's sanctioned by both houses of parliament, assented to by the Governor General, and put into law, and puts the public on notice that these are the things you must do. And if you don't do them, there is some sort of a sanction. If that is not the scheme, and I agree that these provisions in their substance should not be included in such a scheme, then they should not be in the legislation, and we can't go around tinkering with the way we have developed our jurisprudence and our legal legislative framework. We don't use law that way. If we're not
So-
doing it, then we remove it and we put it in a protocol. We put it in a regulations, maybe put it in some sort of ministerial order. I don't know, but you don't put that in legislation, in primary legislation.
All right,
It has no
can I-
purpose there. We don't use it to govern people's behavior without sanction.
Hold on, Senator Gold. You've made a point. Can Mr. Edwards, what's the precedent for this kind of position? Is there any precedent?
Broadly, Chair, I would say that legislation does not have to be coercive. There are several examples of legislation that is directory, that is indicating an approach, a principle, a policy. It does not always have to be coercive. It doesn't have to be buttressed by sanctions. There are provisions of legislation that give an indication. For instance, when you speak of the objects of an act, an object of a primary piece of legislation, that is indicating the intention of the government in relation to a particular area of policy. It doesn't always have to be buttressed by sanctions, but the provision by being in legislation itself is giving an indication of
So I guess the answer to your question is that this is not tinkering with the jurisprudence of the approach that we have taken in the past. So
no,
I mean,
it is not.
Is there?
That's not an answer that I agree with, and I would ask Mr. Edwards to give me one incident in our legislation where we're directing the public to do something that is not something that is sanctioned in primary legislation. Certainly, I agree that putting directive provisions in legislation is something we do all the time. But those types of provisions are usually in relation to how the state acts, not individual citizens. So if there is a piece of legislation that tells me that we have put a provision in law where the citizen is being directed to do something that is not a sanctionable provision, and there is no sanction to the citizen for breaching it, then I'm happy to stand down and I'm happy to learn. But as far as I am aware, when we do that, it is directed at the state, the central government, or a public body, or the state agency. And I'm happy to see the Solicitor General open her video.
I'm going to ask Katie and Birch to come in, and then did the SG have her hand up? It's no longer up.
The SG is coming in, Chairman, and I'd love to hear from her as the authority.
Senator Golden, I am the chair, so I decide who comes in. I saw her hand up before, but then it disappeared, so that's why I was asking. Are you seeking to intervene? Go ahead.
Yes, Chair, but I can't answer the question that Senator Golden Campbell is asking. I wanted to make another intervention.
Oh, it's a separate issue.
I can wait.
Right, so I'm going to ask
it's related to this issue, but I'm not answering her question because I cannot answer her question.
Okay, if it's related, you want to comment or you want?
I was saying I could wait.
Okay, Katie, and you want to come in and then we can.
So I just wanted to clarify that in relation to Section 9, these obligations are being placed on the public officials and persons who are seeking employment as public officials for developing and implementing public health policy. So as had indicated by the SG earlier, while we have removed the sanctions such as the administrative penalties, a breach of these provisions by a public official could be the subject of disciplinary proceedings. The staff orders does have provisions that speak to conflicts of interest and conduct of public officials. So in relation,
I think there's a confusion. That's not the section that I think I was speaking on.
Ms.
Right.
Burt,
You had mentioned
right.
for these sections, so I thought you were.
I was speaking about
section
new
9 and
clause
10.
10 that Mr. Edwards read, the one that was suggesting the future activity part. I get it in relation to the public official employed. But the one I think Senator Gale and I were speaking to was what is in the draft report as the new clause 10.
Okay.
All right, so
If I
yeah, go ahead, Mr. Edwards.
No, I was just going to say that in relation to both 9 and 10, because Senator Gale was referring to the fact that they normally, in her understanding, these types of broadly stated duties are put on the state. Is that what I heard Senator Colin Campbell say? And that it's not usual for these to be put in relation to an individual. These obligations to be put in relation to the activities of an individual. I'm trying to understand Senator Colin Campbell.
What I'm saying, Mr. Edwards, when you said that we put directive provisions in legislation all the time, I'm agreeing with you. Well, it happens often enough. Okay.
Yes.
That is not unusual in and of itself. What I'm finding unusual about this is that we're saying that for this new clause 10, we're removing the sanction provision. And if you remove the sanction provision, why do you put it in primary legislation as directive to the citizen? This is no longer an employee of the state. This person has left the state body and is going out. And the question now is whether or not they're going to work for somebody in the tobacco industry or not. Why is that? If it's directive, then it has no purpose if there's no sanction for doing that. And if there is to be a sanction, as I said before, you have to create a bureaucracy to manage the investigation and the decision making in relation to whether you apply that sanction. So if we're not doing any of that, then this ought not be in primary legislation. And the directive nature of it doesn't justify it being there, because the directive nature of provisions are usually applied to the state. It is the state who gets I would call it the privilege of having directive provisions put into legislation and no sanction. And we have examples of that in many laws. I can think of the Commission of Strata Corporation. I can think of a number of them.
Mr. Edwards, all right, quickly.
In this case, I was just going to say that in this case, we're dealing with a former state official, and we're dealing with a situation where a duty has been created, a statutory duty, a statutory obligation is being created. So it is not purely directive. A statutory obligation has been put in law, and therefore there is a duty, which is something that can be noted and pointed out in relation to the behavior of the individual.
To whom though, Mr. Edwards, because he's no longer working with you. So when he goes and he works for the tobacco industry, we don't have a sanction. How are we going to stop it from happening? Yeah, but how do you call him to the duty?
The fact that there is a duty in law that has not been observed, that in itself is something that can be noted, because it relates to it goes to the integrity and the behavior of the individual. Let me give you an example.
But hold on. Noted where?
No,
who is the body noting
Hold
it?
on, guys, we're getting a little raggedy here now. And I am tempted to say we're going to ring fence this point and move on and then get back to it, even if it means I allow some time to further research and demonstrate in a very obvious way the precedent for the concern or for the allowance of this particular clause, because it's clear that
I'm fine with that, sure.
We're not going to have an agreement.
I'm good with that. Yeah, we have had concerns about this particular clause from the inception.
Yeah, so
this particular section.
Let's ring fence it and then see what happens when we complete the process, even if we need to come back for one more meeting to further elaborate on it. Maybe some background work needs to be done. All right, Mr. Edwards, you want to do that and
Thank
then
you,
move
Chair.
on?
Yes, thank you. So further observation has been made by one stakeholder. I'm continuing the discussion on clause 10, that because of the way in which the term public body is defined in the bill, elected officials would not be covered in clause 9.3b and clause 10.1. Your committee was advised that the guidelines for the implementation of the FCTC, as a framework convention on tobacco control, suggests the inclusion of elected officials. And members of your committee support the recommendation that provisions should be applicable to elected officials and that an appropriate penalty should be applied for any breach of the provisions. Also, consideration should be given to the authority that a minister would make a declaration of interest to. Your committee further recommends that the ministry responsible for health engage in public education campaigns to encourage public bodies to incorporate rules regarding persons employed in the public service and any potential conflict of interest that might arise as a result of their current or prior occupational activity or affiliation with the tobacco industry. The report.
Sorry, SG has.
Oh, hold on a second, Ms. Edwards. The SG has her hand up and wanted to make a point. SG.
Thank you. So this was the related point I had intended to make earlier, and it is on clause 10. Just to point out an editorial that it now only has one, it's only 10, so I think you can take out the one. I'm looking also at the bill because I'm looking at the report and I'm looking at the revised bill, November 27, 2024. So you'd have to take out the one. There is another option for the committee, which is something like this can go in a code.
Right.
Also,
so I don't want to go back.
I'm just making the point that you have an option. That's all. That's
Okay.
just a point. And I'm also going to suggest reconsidering B that talks about providing, sending, informing the previous employer that you intend to go and work somewhere else, because if it's government, I'm not sure of the purpose of something like this, especially for a public servant, a ministry or OSC. I'm not understanding what would happen with informing them of an intention. And if you intend to keep it, the language would need to be somewhat reformulated, because you may not know of your intention during that period. So then that it should be clear that it's if you are aware, then this duty would be imposed on you, but it can't be mandatory in a situation where you may not know. But I'm still not sure that this is very relevant for a public body, like government, for instance, to be informed of what a previous employee is intending to do. Because remember, that's a whole concept that the person is a former employee. And we recently just got a decision from the Chief Justice reminding us all of the law that if someone moves out of the public service, they're no longer a public servant. So there are no duties and obligations on either side. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Edwards, that adds to your burden of clause 10. So ring fence that and let's move on.
Okay, so the next provisions that were mentioned in the report relate to the enforcement, which the committee has agreed with the technical team to excise from the recommendations. So that ends that part of the bill, Chair, part 4. And we move on to part 5. I hand over to Ms. Birch at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Part 5, tobacco smoke-free environment. Clause 12. prohibition of smoking in enclosed public place, enclosed workplace, etc. Your committee accepts the recommendation that subclause 1 be amended to include an electronic non-nicotine delivery system ends. Your committee also recommends that there should not be any enclosed smoking lounges. Clause 13, display of no smoking signs. Members of your committee recommended that subclause 2 be amended to require that no smoking signs be displayed in a manner that enables communication with persons with disabilities as defined in the Disabilities Act. The proposed revised clause 13.2 is as follows. The size of each no smoking sign shall be at least 216 millimeters by 279 millimeters and shall, as far as practicable, be accessible as to display its information in a manner that allows for communication to persons with disabilities. And so we would seek the committee's no objection.
Okay.
Or approval of.
Unless you have an objection, which I see no hand up, can we move on?
Okay, clause 15, protection of children. With the amendment to the definition of the term relevant product in clause 2 to include ends, clause 15.2 will no longer be relevant and is recommended to be deleted. Also, consequential amendments are proposed to clause 15.4 and 5 to remove the reference to subclause 2, and the provisions would need to be renumbered accordingly. Your committee further recommends that the fixed penalty regime in subclause 4 be removed and that provision be made for graduated penalties specified in the 5th schedule of the bill for persons who contravene the provisions. The proposed revised clause 15 is as follows. A person or a seller, and seller is in brackets, so the committee is to decide whether or a seller should be included, shall not supply a tobacco product or relevant product to a child. Subsection 2, every seller shall at all times cause to be displayed in a prominent place on that part of the premises where tobacco products or relevant products are offered for sale, a sign that informs the public that the sale or availing of a tobacco product or relevant product to a child is prohibited by law, and such sign shall be displayed on a surface measuring not less than 12 inch by 8 inch in size. Subsection 3, a person or a seller who contravenes the provisions of subsection 1 or a seller who contravenes the provisions of subsection 2 commits an offense and shall, on summary conviction before a judge of a parish court, be liable to the penalty specified in the 5th schedule. Subsection 4, notwithstanding the provisions of subsection 1, it shall be a defense to an offense under that subsection if it is established that the person charged with the offense made an attempt to verify the age of the person requesting the sale and was presented with any of the documents specified in subsection 5 for the purpose of verification and believed on reasonable grounds that the document was authentic. Subsection 5, for the purposes of this section, the documents are a national identification card, a driver's license issued in Jamaica or any other country, a passport issued by the government of Jamaica or any other country, or such other documentation as the minister may by order prescribe. Subsection 6, a person shall not import, manufacture or supply any sweets, snacks, toys, or other non-tobacco items or objects in the form of tobacco products or relevant products or which imitate tobacco products or relevant products. 7, a person who contravenes the provisions of subsection 6 commits an offence and shall, on summary conviction before a judge of a parish court, be liable to the penalty specified in the 5th schedule. And so before we move on, Minister, the committee's decision regarding the inclusion of the word or seller in subsection 1.
Okay, this was a recommendation.
Chair,
Yes.
if I may, Chair, I believe this is something that was largely editorial and left for the technical team, and it was just a question whether a person would contemplate all the players, and therefore I don't think we need to delay ourselves on this, that the word seller would have been included in the term person.
Okay.
I think it's necessary to just ensure that it's highlighted. So if there are no objections, then we move on. Thank you.
Okay. Next, clause 18, which speaks to the prohibition on public and self-service displays. Some stakeholders recommended that subclause 2 be removed because any prohibition on the display of tobacco products could lead to the potential health risk of storing tobacco products under the counter and potentially increase the illicit trade. In this context, they felt that tobacco products would be treated as an illegal product. Your committee was advised that Article 13 of the FCTC prohibits the advertising of tobacco products and related products, and any display of the same in any manner to the public would be prohibited. Your committee noted that the display of tobacco products and relevant products was classified as advertising, which is prohibited under the bill. Your committee was advised by a PAHO representative that statistics have shown that when there is a complete ban on the display of tobacco products and tobacco-related products, there were usually a reduction in use, especially among youth. Your committee therefore recommends that no amendment is necessary for this clause. Clause 19, which speaks to the prohibition on sale of tobacco products or relevant products in certain places. Having recognized that the term public places is wide and could possibly include places that are private but accessible to the public, we felt that the term should be redefined in clause 2 to provide for a clearer interpretation. Your committee also recommends that the term be removed from the list of places where there is a prohibition on the sale of tobacco products and relevant products. In respect of clause 19.2, one stakeholder suggested that where a person is found guilty of continuously, intentionally, or negligently exposing children to the sale of tobacco products and relevant products, there should be a maximum penalty. Your committee recommends that, similar to the Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Organization Amendment Act 2021, which provides for a harsher penalty when a child is recruited to become part of a criminal group, and this recruitment is done within a certain distance of an educational institution, provision being made in the bill for a similar offense when there is continuous, intentional, or negligent exposure of children to the sale of tobacco products and relevant products. Clause 20, information required on packages, etc. We noted the inconsistency in clause 20, subsection 3 and part 2B of the first schedule regarding the size of the area of graphic health warnings on all tobacco products and nicotine products, and recommended that the size of the area for graphic health warnings should be 80% wherever in the bill it is provided for. Part 7, advertising and promotion sponsorship, which is clause 24, ban on tobacco advertising and promotion. One stakeholder expressed concern that the clause and the provisions at paragraph 1E, J, K, and N of the fourth schedule will disrupt the relationship of business partners by prohibiting certain forms of tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, such as gift giving, retailer incentives, and the offering of discounted products. It was felt that these prohibitions have an implication for a free market economy and the earning potential of business. Whilst there was a general consensus by all members of your committee that there should be prohibition on promotion and advertising of tobacco and relevant products, some members of your committee expressed concern as to whether a distributor could be prevented from incentivizing purchases to a wholesaler or a wholesaler to a retailer, since this was a standard practice in trade and commerce and could potentially lead to price regulation. Your committee noted that there would be a challenge to regulate prices between companies. However, one member expressed the view that distributors and wholesalers of tobacco products and relevant products could use incentivized purchase as a loophole to get persons addicted to tobacco products, and therefore suggested that pricing of tobacco products and related products by companies should be maintained as one standard. Members of your committee were advised by a PAHO representative that incentivizing purchase was a subtle way of advertising and brand promotion, and judicial decisions have shown that a complete ban on tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship was not an improper prohibition. With regard to the issue of enforcement, your committee was advised that the disclosure requirements at clauses 24 and 25, which are in keeping with Article 11 of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, could be used effectively as a mechanism for information such as price adjustments. Subclause 1. Concerns were raised regarding a complete ban on tobacco advertisement and sponsorship. The AGC advised your committee of the case of RJR McDonald Inc. versus Canada Attorney General, where the Supreme Court in Canada ruled that a complete ban on tobacco product advertisement was incompatible with the rights of freedom of expression found in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Your committee learned that international obligations were considered in making a judgment in the case, and that subsequent to the ruling, the tobacco control legislation in Canada was amended to prohibit a complete ban on advertisement. Your committee was told that since Canada used a constitutional test similar to Jamaica, it was important that the provision of the bill was consistent with Jamaica's constitutional right to freedom of expression. However, the Ministry of Health and Wellness argued that questions on advertising as a form of expression was seen as a form of commercial expression, which the courts considered could be distinguished from expression in the broadest sense of freedom to communicate ideas, etc. It was pointed out that the protection that one would have in relation to the broader concept of expression of ideas, etc., would not apply in the same way in relation to advertising or promoting commercial information. The Ministry of Health and Wellness did not hold the view that a ban on advertising should be treated in the same way as overturning one's right to freedom of expression. A PAHO representative also advised that there was a legal challenge in Uganda in relation to a similar provision being considered by your committee, and the court in that country had not overturned the case. The PAHO representative advised that whilst the country's constitutional safeguards should be noted, consideration could be given to similar or other challenges that have been raised in countries such as Colombia, Uruguay, and Panama. It was pointed out that consideration should also be given to how to treat with a complete ban on tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, as opposed to the other commercial expressions or freedom. Your committee noted the concerns expressed by the AGC, the ministry, and PAHO. Members of your committee agreed to change the order of the words in subclause 1 with words to effect of all advertising and promotion of tobacco products or relevant products and tobacco sponsorship is prohibited.
I see SG have her hand up. SG.
Thank you, Chair. I know that the committee has taken a decision, but what is reflected here is not, well, it does not accurately reflect the issues from the Attorney General's chambers that we raised. And the big issue that we have is that there is one element of the test which we do not think we can justify before a court. And I don't see that reflected here. So the test is comprised of several components. And there is the minimum impairment of the right. That is what we pointed out, that we think there is a major concern and we don't see how it can be justified. And we say that having regard to Article 13.3 of the convention, which is also not reflected here. What is reflected here talks about a complete ban. The convention goes on to speak about parties that are not in a position to undertake the comprehensive ban due to its constitution or constitutional principles. That is also not reflected in the report. And that was a concern that we had and that we raised, and we still have, and that we still raise, because there is, and in fact, when there is a discussion about Canada, it's not that Canada just prohibited the complete ban. Canada proceeded under Article 13.3 to do a restriction, which is still a very harsh restriction, but not the complete ban. The minimum impairment test, what the courts have said, and up to very recently, and we keep having additional decisions coming even from the Privy Council, which is also not reflected in the report. But we have a number of decisions from our full court, from our Court of Appeal, and from the Privy Council that also specifically speak to the minimum impairment, meaning when you are justifying, and the burden is on the state, and the burden is very heavy on the state. It's almost basically like the criminal standard of proof. And the state has to show, among other things, that there was no other way to infringe the right other than this way, and that there was no other minimum impairment of the right that could justify the objective. The fact that we are using our international obligations as a reason to impose this prohibition, this complete prohibition, the fact that our international obligations allow us to do something a little less than the complete ban is the concern that the Attorney General's Chambers has raised and continues to raise. And even if the committee is not with us, I would still say that the report needs to reflect that information. Because honestly, I'm not sure how, I know, Chair, at one point you said, you'll take your chances at court. To be honest, we don't know what argument we would be able to use before the court about the minimum impairment of the right. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to commend you for your stellar recollection of all that has been said and what's missing. I'm not sure why your opinions are not reflected in the report. Perhaps the report writers can give us an indication of why that is the case. I don't know. Is that you, Mr. Edwards?
No, it's the committee, the department.
Yeah, why is that the case? Because I do agree with you, Madam SG, that your views should be reflected. And then, so that's one thing. The other now becomes the substance of your comments. And Mr. Edwards, I'd like you to come in on that. But in terms of the what was said and what is to be in the report, I'm going to ask the parliamentary rep to capture that information from me. Okay? Is that okay? Ms.
Okay, Chair.
Right. Okay, great. So then, once we're gonna be doing that, then let's hear from Mr. Edwards in terms of the actual substance of the concern. Mr. Edwards, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. And I fully appreciate the expression of the concern by the Solicitor General and the need for those views, those opinions to be appropriately and fulsomely expressed in the report. Substantively, the main issue which the ministry had to grapple with is the question of, and Solicitor General had indicated, the minimal impairment, whether the full ban on advertising satisfies the minimal impairment test. And if I'm with your indulgence, Chair and other members, if I could just refer to Justice Batts in the full court of the Supreme Court, Jamaica Supreme Court, where he adopted reference to the Oakes principles and the fact that if we're going to be overturning any of our rights, we have to indicate that it is not only reasonably and demonstrably justified, but that the way in which the limitation is done, as the SG has indicated, it must be there must be a minimal impairment of the right. In other words, there has to be something significant in the impact of a particular circumstance to justify a limitation of a right. And the extent of the limitation should only be to the lowest, the most basic extent necessary. One of the concerns in Canada, and we have looked at the Canadian legislation and cases, is that a significant 1995 case that was brought by the tobacco industry against the imposition of tobacco control provisions and raising issues of constitutionality, which have come before this committee. One of the concerns looking back, and this is coming from subsequent judgments, is that there seemed to have been an insufficiency of evidence before the court as to the impact of tobacco use in that society, and that's affected what was brought before the court. Now, what the Ministry of Health and Ms. Birch is well able to indicate, what the Ministry of Health has done in recent years is sought to gather evidence as to the impact on health, the public health impact, and the significance of that evidence in terms of the deleterious effect on health of individuals is what the ministry has used as a basis for proposing not the ban of the use of tobacco, but we're talking about the use of influence by advertising. So, of course, tobacco use is not illegal, but it is the influential use, and there's evidence to show that use and the likelihood of use increases according to how advertising and marketing is done in relation to the product. So this is one of the bases for the Ministry of Health proposing that it is such a significant factor, the influence of advertising in relation to the use or the encouragement to use of tobacco, that it has been felt that the ban on tobacco advertising is seen as not excessive, is not seen as arbitrary, is not seen as capricious, but is seen as a measure that has been considered very carefully having regard to the public health implications of tobacco advertising. Thank you.
I'm so sorry, Chair, but I just feel I have to just make a point here. While I understand everything that Mr. Edwards has said, that issue does not address the minimum impairment issue. It doesn't. That response is not a response to the minimum impairment. That's a response to other aspects of the test, including the fact that you are doing an infringement in the first place. The minimum impairment, where it looks to see how far you go, that is not how you answer that test. And this is something I'm painfully aware of, because we have been before the courts on a number of matters. And I know that is not the response to the minimum impairment. When you're going to look at the minimum impairment, you're going to see, why do you need to go so far? And I am saying, and I look back at the convention and I see that you have other options. Why have you not utilized those other options? And that is not a response to that question.
Other options like what?
Under 13.3 and 13.4 of the convention, where it talks about a party who can't, but I said that before. It says, as a minimum in 4, and in accordance with its constitution or constitutional principles, each party shall prohibit all forms of tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship that promote a tobacco product by any means that are false, misleading, or deceptive, or likely to create an erroneous impression about its characteristics, health effects, hazards, or emissions. And it goes on and it gives a list onto F. So it's not the complete ban, but it is a serious restriction. The issue is, we know that we have a constitutional issue. And so why have we gone and used and implemented 13.1 instead of 13.3 and 13.4 of the convention? And I'm saying the responses I've seen, even in the report about the commercial expression, which, by the way, also I'm not clear on which case law we have in our jurisdiction that splits up the freedom of expression in this way. I'm just saying those responses do not answer the specific aspect of the test that I have raised. Thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
Chairman? Sorry.
Sorry, Chair. I use the Senator Golden Campbell, but I think Ms. Birch could also respond from a technical point of view in relation to the evidence issue.
Okay. Senator Golden, go ahead, and then I'll ask.
I obviously, wearing my private hat, would have some concerns about this provision. And I went back when the SG first raised it, first spoke this afternoon on it, and looked at the convention again at Article 13. And I would just say this, because I agree that in the face of the language of Article 13, you would really be hard pressed to come up with a justification in respect of the minimum impairment standard, because the convention does more than set out broad language. The convention actually gives you the language that you ought to use to minimally impair or minimally infringe the right. And so I don't know how any attorney would go into the court and say, well, this is the minimum, when the convention itself spells the minimum out to us. How would we overcome that?
Okay. Can anyone come in? Ms. Birch?
So when we looked at it, Minister, the question as to why this provision comes to not just meeting what the convention says, but the bigger issue is addressing the public health impact of tobacco control, which we have evidence locally of that impact and the increase in prevalence. The National Council on Drug Abuse, they would have done a rapid assessment, I think it was last year, that looked at rapid assessments on drug prevalence, and where based on their assessment, there is an increase in prevalence in tobacco control, and we are aware of the impact in terms of non-communicable diseases that tobacco contributes to. We also considered that in subsection 5 of clause 24, there are exceptions to the prohibition set out in paragraphs A to E. So we think that the provision has that balance in terms of what we consider to be the minimum to address the public health impact, while also allowing some exceptions to the tobacco industry.
Anyone else wants to come in here?
Chair, where did Ms. Burke refer to? In terms of exceptions a while ago, I missed what
subsection 5.
Okay, I mean, my own view, if I may, I clearly would want to know that the law or the mischief that we're trying to pursue is backed up by the legal framework. So I'm listening to the lawyers on both sides of the argument, that is, and trying to see to what extent what we're trying to achieve can in fact be achieved. And the issue with tobacco for me is that the impact is very predictable. Impact is very predictable, and the evidence supports that. Ultimately, it kills you, because that's the nature of the product, and there is more than enough evidence to support that. It does hasten your demise and is a major facilitator of your demise. You just need to go up to the chest hospital and you get all of that information. So I'm just trying to determine, based on listening to the SG, Mr. Edwards, if that case can't be made and made successfully in a court of law. I mean, it has been made in other jurisdictions. Is it that there's something different here? Is it that our Constitution allows for a different interpretation? That's kind of where I'm trying to make a determination. I would certainly not, from a layman's perspective, like to see tobacco companies pushing advertising in the country on persons who may, because of a lack of knowledge, because it is a fad, it's a fashion, it looks good based on the persuasive nature of the ads, take up a habit that becomes addictive and ultimately leads to their demise. Clearly, that would not be in the interest of public health. And that has been the battle across the world, wherever the debate around tobacco has been waged. And your excellent recollection of my comments, Madam SG, was perhaps should be contextualized in regards to the almost predictable move, having passed this legislation and taking some of these actions, which is that the tobacco company will eventually end up in a court to challenge some of these provisions. And there is ample precedent and ample examples of this. So you literally have to prepare yourself for it and assume that it is going to happen. My view is that the committee should, while recognizing and be sensitive to this, should allow that process to take place, obviously within reason, because otherwise what we would be doing is sending a signal that somehow we are already accepting defeat before we even make the case as to what tobacco does, what it represents, and its impact on the population. And in that context, I may have said, let's go to court because we're going to go anyway, because that tends to be the next move of tobacco, of big tobacco. But I don't want the signal to be sent that we are accepting almost defeat before we get there. And so we're going to water down the rules because we're going to end up in court. I'd rather test it in court as another layer of trying to make the case for why tobacco is not good for you. So that's kind of my rationale and my thinking. I see the two hands up. SG, you want to come in first or Senator Bolin?
Just want to put my hand in the queue. Sorry about
Oh,
that.
sorry.
I can't
Okay, right.
find the reason. I just want to put my hand in the
Okay, it's not over.
Chair, I will yield to the committee members.
Okay.
Thank you, SG. Chairman, I appreciate what you said just now, and I too, quite frankly, would wish to not see any advertising of tobacco products at any point. But that is my own personal view. The more fundamental point for me, and certainly as an attorney at law, is the question of how we treat with constitutional protection. And it is not enough for me as an attorney to say, well, boy, let's test this in court because the likelihood is going to end up there anyway. And certainly as a legislator who is an attorney at law, I want to know that we have done the best we can do to ensure that the provisions that we craft are constitutionally sound. Now, the argument that Ms. Birch raised in relation to the data coming from the National Council and the increase in use of tobacco products, and I don't know if there's a concomitant increase in non-communicable diseases that can be attributable solely to tobacco products. I don't know if you have that data, but that's still
And the answer to that is yes.
So I don't know, was that data presented to us in the committee? I don't recall that.
Well, I think the survey report came out last year.
Well, I'll allow Ms. Curlew to.
If it is, could you just round robin that around again by email at some point? But the point I'm making, Chairman, is that the hazards of tobacco have been known for some time now. And I don't know what the data suggests in terms of whether or not usage has gone up, gone down, or has consistently trended up, or it's just all over the place. I'm really not quite sure at this point. But that in and of itself wouldn't be a justification that would satisfy the minimal impairment standard, because it has been a situation that has persisted for such a long time. And I really want to urge the technical team, Minister, to really look back at this one. It's not just a matter of, well, we may not quite have it, so let's test it. We are the Parliament, and we do have a duty to ensure that we are not passing law that is going to likely be constitutionally challengeable.
Right. So I don't want you to trivialize my comments because I'm not suggesting that we become outlandish with our posture, knowing that we are going to be defeated. And remember, you're right, we are legislators, and so we must arm ourselves with the information. And I believe that the Ministry of Health and in any jurisdiction would be privy to a lot of information around health-related impact of particular lifestyle. And tobacco is normally number one in terms of it being a contributor to some of the debilitating conditions that people suffer and ultimately to their demise. So this is not an opinion, this is not just venturing an opinion in a flippant way. It's advancing a scientific theory that has been proven by evidence. the matter of the constitutionality of it. I mean, we are lawmakers, so we make laws. And the objective of laws, as you can, I believe, appreciate, is to ensure that the rights on both sides of individuals are protected, yes, but that the greater good of the society is also protected. So I am, I think there's a strong case to make that case around why advertisement should be banned. But let me hear from Miss Curlew, since you wanted to come in, and then I'll ask Madam SG to.
Chair, before you go to Ms. Curlew, that data that you're referring to, forgive me if I'm not recalling, because it's been a while we've been going at this. Was it put before this committee?
No.
Ms. Curlew, I think the research came after that section of the committee conversation.
Right. Okay. So she will put it before the committee now? Because certainly if you're going to make a justification for this kind of provision, then we would need to be satisfied too that your conclusions are what we would agree with.
Right. I'll certainly ask her to, but can I just ask her to comment?
Thank you.
Ms. Curlew?
Thank you, and thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, my camera is muted. I'm currently off and at the airport. So just to say that I'll get the data to you to circulate. My comment here is anecdotally, unfortunately, right now, but we have seen referrals coming in from primary schools and high schools for children vaping. And so we are very concerned. We have had now to have an intervention, a anti-vaping intervention that we're creating now to go into these schools. We're very concerned about youth use now and the targeting of them by the industry. So the vaping, I think the use, I don't want to give you any data now because it will be out of my head.
That's
so I'll
fine.
gather that data and give it to you. But certainly, we are very concerned about youth being targeted and would want to raise it here and say, can we do the maximum that's available to ban the advertising and promotion to protect our future? We do not have any data on the health impact because we're not in the hospitals. I'm certain that maybe the ministry can come up with that, but the data where usage is concerned, I'll gather together and send it to the committee by Monday because I'm off until Monday. But just very concerned about it. Primary school students now using, I think as low as 9 or 10. So what can we do to prevent that? How can we get the industry to understand that leave our children alone, do not target them? So we would say, go to the max where tax is concerned. Let's ban the advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, because what it shows is a good image of the industry. And therefore, what we find is that they don't see any harm in using because these industries are nice. So there's a term, sorry, it's eluded me now. My brain is gone. But what I'm saying is that they don't see any harm. The risk of it, there's low perception of risk now among the youth where tobacco use is concerned. So we're very concerned about that. And we'll give you the data, as I say. Sorry, my camera is on. We'll give you the data. Sorry.
Fine. So Ms. Curlew, can you just gather that and we can circulate that via email to the committee members. Madam SG, you had a point you wanted to raise?
Yes, thank you. And while getting that data is very important, and while getting all that information about the deleterious effects on health, which also includes death, is very important. I repeat what I said before. That does not answer the part of the test that I'm talking about. So I'm going to read, and we've had experience with this, Chair, and I'm going to read from the Privy Council with the Jamaica Bar Association and the General Legal Counsel matter, where restrictions were placed on not restrictions, obligations were placed on the legal profession in relation to reporting information regarding their clients. And the issue went all the way to the Privy Council because, of course, we, as attorneys, have what we consider a sacrosanct duty to our clients, which is legal professional privilege, among other things. And the Privy Council, again, going back through the Oakes test, where it spoke about a number of matters, spoke about when it's rationally connected to the objective, it must impair as little as possible the right or freedom in question. That is, there should be minimal impairment of the right or freedom. So I'm not talking about the other aspects of the test, like whether we can justify any sort of infringement, whether we're looking at the proportionality aspect, and whether the rights of the citizen against each other and the state. That's not the part of the test I'm looking at. I'm looking at the impairment as little as possible. All right, so I will read a little bit more.
Okay.
The reasonability of degree of infringement. And the reason this is important, because we actually have an option. So this is what the court will look at. Did you have an option in terms of the impairment of the right? And I'm saying that there is an option given. And I'm not sure, I hear persons talking about, you know, you want to make sure that you have restrictions. The option given in the convention is quite stringent.
All right, so what I would suggest then, Madam SG, because again, you know, I've always encouraged that some of these conversations take place before we get to this level. Your office in particular, which is quite important, with the team represented in ministry, Mr. Edwards, Cadian, for example, in particular. And so you speak of options. Maybe what needs to happen is a conversation about what those options are, while at the same time, Mr. Edwards, an argument in favor with the supporting information or evidence, some of which will be provided by Ms. Curlew, to say why the position that is being held or being advanced on the side of the ministry is actually
excuse me though, Chair.
Yes.
I've actually written, you know, I think these chambers, I think we may have sent at least 2 opinions on it. So it's not that we have just talked about it. I think we're the only persons who have been sending written comments to the committee. We actually provided 2 written opinions on it. I don't know that there's any more discussion, and all I'm saying is the issue I am raising, there has been no response to it. So it's not that it's not been discussed. I am saying though that the responses given even in the meeting today do not address the minimum impairment of the right. They do not. And I can say that categorically. And I've been involved in matters where we've had to try and justify a minimum impairment, including that case at the Privy Council. We were successful because we were able to show the safeguards and that we did not go too far, and that we are still able to meet an objective. And I'm saying that if you go through Article 13, 3 and 4, you have options. Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure that a further discussion will help. I'll try to make myself available, but my views have been very clear. The views of these chambers have been very clear. They have been documented in writing and submitted to the committee, as well as I have spoken about it as well. Thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
And Chair, I totally agree with Solicitor General that there has been much ventilation of these issues, and the ministry has also sought to be thorough in its own responses. I'm looking now at one of our comments written to the SG, the AG's chambers, 16 pages long, dealing with some of these issues, mentioning several of the cases. So it's something that has been, as SG has said, we have had thorough discussions. We have engaged each other on these matters at length. Further data, further information will always be welcome, but it's something that has been carefully considered and examined by the legal team and the technical team of the ministry. Sure.
Well, a decision will have to be taken one way or the other. So maybe I need to be a little more involved with the conversation around the evidence for and against, and maybe expand the kind of advice that is necessary to make a decision. But we're at 12:30 now. I believe this is the time for the we're committed to end the meeting. So it appears as if we will need to have another meeting. Let's have a discussion on it. Well, you have two issues now that you have to do. We have to have some conversations around. And where are we? Where are we now?
We're on page 17.
That's clause 25.
Yes, clause 25.
25. Anybody else wants to come in? Any final comments on what has been said? Yes, Mr. Edwards.
Sure. This is just a point. Going back to the earlier intervention of Senator Golding Campbell, because it's something that you know we considered very seriously. This issue of putting provisions in the law and not seeing the ultimate impact of them in the forms of sanction or other type of
Edwards, I thought we had ruled on that to say that we were going to capture some more information and commute. You want to go back to that at this point?
I just want to mention one piece of legislation in this regard, and that's the Disabilities Act. That's all, Chair. That's an example of a piece of legislation where we have several issues being promoted in terms of rights of the disabled, where you don't necessarily have direct sanctions or criminal penalties, but it is promoting a new form of approach in relation to a category of society. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Okay, so I'm gonna have to suspend or end this session, the meeting, and ask for another date from the Parliament, even if it's in this format, because there's another meeting that I have, and so we will have to schedule another session. So if everybody is okay with that, can I ask if there's any new business? Any new business? No. Any other business? And is there a date that you may have had pre-planned for the possibility of another meeting?
No, Chairman, because of the issues that we are currently having at the Parliament, they recommend that we meet online only.
Okay, fair enough. So can we try to have one next week?
Yes, Chairman. Do you have a date in mind?
Thursday, maybe same day as no.
Okay.
And maybe we could try to finish up or go through the rest of the document and then return to the two areas, or start with the two areas, which would mean some further clarity and information on, in particular, the first area, and an examination of the options that SG spoke of, and or some sort of reinforcement of what the minimum standards could possibly look like. And so we can take some decisions on those two areas.
What time are we looking for Thursday, Chair? Just to be sure.
Marshall? Don't know about what time in the diary is good for me.
10:30.
10:30. Okay. Could we do the same time? 10:30 to 12:30?
Okay, so I'll check the calendar for the other meeting.
Sorry, which day? I'm so sorry. This is Marlene Aldred. Which day is that?
Next Thursday.
No, the Integrity Commission. The Joint Select Committee for Integrity Commission had blocked out the 11th and the 12th.
Okay.
Of June.
So, Chairman, I was just saying, let me just ensure there are no clashes. I was just about to mention that, and then get back in short order, Chairman.
All right, that's a more difficult way to have a agreed date, but if we have to, so you will circulate that information.
Yes, Chairman, and I will speak with Miss Ferron first.
Okay. All right. All right, so we have to do that then. So are we would, in terms of the approach, would we want to go through and complete and then go back to the speaking points, the two that we have, or any other that may arise? That may be the easiest way to go. Are all agreed on with that approach? And maybe allow some time to reflect a little on the 2 points.
That's fine with me, sir.
Okay. If there are no objections, then we'll try to do that. And then give a little more time to sort of flesh out those two, and hopefully no more comes up, but just in case others come up, then we'd then do a last session if necessary on those points. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll be in touch in terms of the next meeting date. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Okay, bye everyone.
Thank you, Chair.